Miss Evangeline Rosewood? The deep, impatient voice made Evie look up from the geranium pot she was watering in the front garden. At 26, she had grown accustomed to unpleasant surprises. Astronomical electricity bills, leaks that appeared out of nowhere, neighbors complaining about the noise from the birds she fed. But the man standing at the gate of her grandmother's Victorian house didn't seem like the kind of surprise she was used to. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary as a librarian, he held a leather briefcase and had that rigid posture of someone accustomed to getting everything he wanted. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the hot August wind, and his eyes were the color of steel and seemed just as cold. Yes, that's me. Evie placed the watering can on the ground, wiping her hands on the floral apron she wore over her yellow dress. Her golden blonde hair caught the afternoon sunlight, creating a halo effect around her heart-shaped face as she tucked a loose curl behind her ear. Even in her simple gardening clothes, there was something luminous about her, the kind of natural beauty that made people stop and stare, though she remained completely oblivious to it. "Can I help you?" The man opened the gate without asking permission, which was already a first negative point on Evie's mental list, and walked down the stone path leading to the porch. His Italian shoes made an authoritative sound against the irregular stones that she and Grandma Cordelia had placed together years ago. "I'm Robert Sterling." He spoke the name as if expecting some kind of reverence. "From Sterling and Associates. I have a proposal I'm sure will be of interest to you." Evie blinked, her sea-green eyes widening slightly. The name meant absolutely nothing to her, but his condescending tone definitely told her everything she needed to know about the type of person she was dealing with. "A proposal?" She crossed her arms, the movement causing her blonde waves to shimmer as she tilted her head. "About what?" "Robert?" What kind of name was that anyway? Looked around with an expression that made it clear what he thought about the property. The 3-story Victorian house needed a good renovation, it was true. The paint on the shutters was peeling, some roof tiles were loose, and the fence needed repairs in several places. But it was the home she had known since childhood, where she had spent every summer with Grandma Cordelia, where she had learned to make apple pies and identify every type of bird that visited the garden. This property. He gestured vaguely with his gloved hand. "I'm prepared to make a generous offer for the house and land." Evie's heart gave a strange jump, her delicate features reflecting her confusion. "I'm sorry? You inherited this property 6 months ago, correct?" Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. "I'm willing to pay much more than it's worth in the current market. Let's say $2 million. $2 million. Evie felt her legs go weak, her porcelain complexion paling slightly. $2 million would solve all her financial problems. She could pay off the debts Grandma had left behind, pay off her student loan, maybe even take a trip to Europe, as she had always dreamed. Why? The question came out before she could think better of it, her melodious voice carrying a note of suspicion. "Why would you pay so much for a house that needs renovation?" The smile Robert gave was as fake as a $3 bill. "I have my reasons. What matters is that you'll be very rich, Miss Rosewood. You could buy a new house modern without all these maintenance problems." He said, "maintenance problems," as if it were something disgusting. Evie felt a pang of irritation growing in her chest, bringing a flush of color back to her cheeks. "And what do you intend to do with the property?" "That's none of your business." Robert's polite mask slipped a little, revealing the arrogance that lay just beneath the surface. "What matters is the money. $2 million cash. I can have the papers ready by tomorrow." Evie looked at the house behind him, her golden hair catching the light as she turned. The same house where Grandma Cordelia had been born, where she had raised 3 children, where she had taught Evie to make gingerbread cookies every Christmas Eve. The house where every room contained a precious memory, where every floorboard told a story. "No." The word came out firmer than she expected, her delicate jaw set with surprising determination. Robert blinked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Excuse me?" "I said no. The house is not for sale." His face contorted into an expression of incredulity. Miss Rosewood, perhaps you didn't understand. I'm talking about $2 million. For this. He gestured dismissively toward the house. This ruined relic. Evie's irritation transformed into pure rage, her green eyes flashing like emeralds in firelight. This ruined relic has 150 years of history. It was built by my great-great-grandfather, lovingly renovated by 4 generations of my family, and it's not for sale. Not for 2 million, not for 10 million. Don't be ridiculous. Robert took a step forward, invading her personal space. Despite her delicate appearance, Evie didn't back down, her chin lifting defiantly. Everyone has a price. 3 million, then. Everyone has a price? Evie repeated, incredulous, her musical voice rising an octave. What kind of person do you think I am? An intelligent person, I hope. He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Someone who understands that money is more important than cheap sentimentalism. Cheap sentimentalism? Evie's voice went up another octave, her blonde curls seeming to quiver with indignation. This house represents 5 generations of my family, and now it can represent your financial future. Robert sighed dramatically, as if dealing with a stubborn child. Look, I understand. Women tend to be emotional about these things, but be rational. What are you going to do with this house? You don't even live here. You live in that tiny apartment downtown, don't you? The fact that he knew where she lived was disturbing, but the condescending tone was what really made her see red, bringing a fierce light to her beautiful eyes. Women tend to be emotional? Evie repeated slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. Yes, you get attached to things without real importance, but I can help you get over that. He smiled again, that arrogant and irritating smile. 4 million. This is my final offer. Evie looked at him for a long moment, her golden beauty masking the storm brewing within. She looked at the expensive suit, the shiny shoes, the leather briefcase that probably cost more than her car. She looked at the presumptuous smile and the cold eyes that saw her as just another obstacle to be removed. Then she looked at the watering can at her feet. You know what, Mr. Sterling? She bent down slowly to pick up the watering can, still full of water from watering the flowers. Her blonde hair fell like a silk curtain around her face as she moved. You're right about one thing. Ah, excellent. He relaxed, clearly thinking he had won. I knew you were smart. Women really can be emotional. Evie smiled sweetly, her beauty absolutely radiant even in her anger as she raised the watering can. And do you know what makes me very, very emotional? Robert frowned. What? Arrogant men who think they can buy anything, including people's feelings. And before he could react, Evie turned the entire watering can over his head. The cold water soaked his perfectly styled hair, ran down his expensive suit, pooled inside his Italian shoes. Robert stood there for a moment, completely shocked, dripping water in Evie's garden like a poorly positioned fountain statue. You. He ran his hands over his face, wiping water from his eyes. You threw water on me. I noticed that. Evie placed the empty watering can on the ground, crossing her arms again, looking like an avenging angel with her golden hair still catching the sunlight and her green eyes blazing with righteous fury. And if you don't leave my property now, I'm going to get the hose. For a moment, Robert seemed completely lost. Clearly, no one had ever dared to do something like this to him before. His eyes were wide, mouth slightly open, a drop of water hanging from the tip of his aristocratic nose. Then he grabbed his wet briefcase, tried to recover some of the dignity that had drained away with the water, and pointed a trembling finger in her direction. You're going to regret this, Miss Rosewood. I always get what I want, and I want this property. One way or another, it will be mine. Good luck with that. Evie waved cheerfully as he marched toward the gate, leaving a trail of wet footprints along the way, looking like a gorgeous, furious goddess of retribution. And next time, try knocking on the door like a civilized person. Robert left, slamming the gate so hard it startled the birds in the garden. Evie watched him get into a black BMW. Of course he drove a black BMW, and speed away down the street like a teenager having a tantrum. Only after he disappeared from view did Evie realize what she had done. She had thrown water on what appeared to be a very rich and very powerful man, a man who clearly wasn't used to hearing no for an answer. Oh my God. She sat down on the porch steps, putting her head in her hands, her blonde hair falling like a curtain around her face. What did I do? But when she looked up at the house, her house, the Rosewood family house, she felt a wave of determination wash over her delicate features. It didn't matter how rich or powerful Robert Sterling was. It didn't matter how many millions he offered. This house was not for sale, even if it meant war. What Evie didn't know was that 20 blocks away, Robert Sterling was standing in the shower of his penthouse, hot water running down his body, and he couldn't stop thinking about her furious green eyes, the way she had stood her ground, the courage she had shown. And for the first time in his 32 years of life, he wasn't just thinking about how to get what he wanted. He was thinking about the golden-haired woman who had dared to say no to him. The war had begun, but neither of them knew it would soon transform into something completely different. 3 days later, Evie was beginning to think she might have overreacted. Just a tiny bit. Maybe throwing water on a complete stranger wasn't her finest moment, even if he had been insufferably arrogant about her beloved family home. She was restocking the romance section at Willowbrook Public Library, humming softly to herself, when her best friend Penny burst through the doors like a tornado with urgency. Evie! Penny's red curls were practically standing on end with excitement. You are not going to believe what I just heard at the coffee shop. Good morning to you too, Pen. Evie smiled, tucking a strand of golden hair behind her ear. And what earth-shattering gossip has the rumor mill produced today? Robert Sterling! Penny grabbed Evie's arm dramatically. The Robert Sterling was asking questions about you all over town yesterday. Evie's heart did a little flip. He was what now? Martha from the diner said he came in asking about the beautiful blonde who lives in the old Rosewood place. Then he went to Peterson's hardware store, the post office, even talked to old Mr. Jameson at the gas station. Penny's eyes were sparkling with mischief. Girl, what did you do to that man? I may have gotten him a little wet. Evie bit her lip, remembering the satisfying splash of water hitting his perfectly styled hair. You got him wet? Penny's eyebrows shot up. Evie Rosewood, you scandalous woman. Details now. Not like that? Evie's cheeks flushed pink. I threw my watering can at him. He was being incredibly rude about the house, saying women are too emotional, offering me millions like I was some gold digger who'd sell my soul for money. Millions? Penny's voice cracked. As in more than 1 million? 4 million was his final offer. Evie shrugged, going back to shelving books. I told him the house wasn't for sale at any price. Penny stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You turned down $4 million? It's not about the money, Pen. That house is holy mother of romance novels. Penny sank into the nearest chair. Evie, do you realize what you've done? Defended my family's legacy? You've become the heroine of your own love story. Penny waved her hands excitedly. Think about it. Mysterious, gorgeous millionaire shows up out of nowhere. You're the only woman who's ever said no to him. You literally threw water in his face. And now he's asking about you all over town? This is chapter 1 of every romance novel ever written. Evie rolled her eyes. This is real life, not one of your books. He's probably just angry and trying to find dirt on me to use against me somehow. Or, Penny grinned wickedly, he's completely fascinated by the golden-haired goddess who had the courage to put him in his place. Before Evie could respond, the library door chimed again. Both women turned, and Evie's heart stopped completely. Robert Sterling walked in and he looked different. Gone was the perfectly pressed suit, replaced by dark jeans and a casual button-down shirt that was actually quite flattering. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his fingers through it, and there was something almost vulnerable in his steel-gray eyes. Miss Rosewood. His voice was softer than before, lacking the commanding arrogance from their first meeting. Mr. Sterling. Evie lifted her chin, trying to ignore how attractive he looked when he wasn't being a complete jerk. Come to make another insulting offer? Actually, I came to apologize. The words seemed to surprise him as much as they surprised her. Penny made a small squeaking sound and quickly ducked behind the biography section, though her red curls were still clearly visible. Apologize? Evie blinked, her green eyes wide with confusion. You? Robert ran a hand through his hair, messing it up even more. I've been thinking about our conversation. And by thinking, I mean I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. You were right to throw water on me. I was? This was not going at all how Evie had expected. I was condescending and presumptuous. I made assumptions about you and your motivations that were completely unfair. He took a step closer and Evie caught a hint of his cologne. Something expensive but not overpowering. I'm not used to people saying no to me, and I handled it badly. Evie studied his face, looking for signs of deception. But he seemed genuinely remorseful, his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked suspiciously like sincerity. Why do you want my house so badly? She asked quietly. Robert was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting around the cozy library. I'm developing a luxury high-rise complex. Your property is the last piece I need to complete the project. Without it, I lose everything. Everything. I've invested my entire fortune in this development. If I can't acquire your lot, the city won't approve the project and I'll be bankrupt within 6 months. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out karma has a sense of irony. Evie felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. I'm sorry, but that doesn't change anything. The house isn't for sale. I know. Robert looked directly at her, and for a moment she saw past the wealthy businessman facade to something raw and honest underneath. And after thinking about it, I understand why. I spent the last 2 days learning everything I could about your family, about that house. 5 generations built by hand, survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, countless storms. It's not just a house, is it? It's a legacy. Evie's heart did something funny in her chest. You researched my family? Your great-great-grandfather was a craftsman. The woodwork in that house is museum quality. Your great-grandmother started the first women's suffrage group in the county. Your grandmother Cordelia taught piano to half the town for 50 years. Robert smiled, and it was completely different from his arrogant smirk from before. And you're a librarian who feeds birds and grows the most beautiful flowers in the neighborhood. You're all caretakers, in your own way. Evie felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever understood the importance of her family's history like that before. That's exactly right. So, I'm not here to make another offer. Robert took another step closer, close enough that Evie could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes. I'm here to ask if there's any way we could work together instead of against each other. Work together how? I don't know yet, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to figure it out. He paused, looking almost nervous. Maybe over dinner? Evie's pulse quickened. Are you asking me on a date? I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm not completely irredeemable. Robert's smile was uncertain but genuine. And yes, I suppose I am asking you on a date. From behind the biography section came a barely suppressed squeal of excitement. Evie glanced over at Penny's hiding spot, then back at Robert. 3 days ago, she would have said no immediately. But the man standing in front of her wasn't the same arrogant businessman who had invaded her garden. This man seemed human. One dinner, she said finally. But I'm choosing the restaurant. Deal. Robert's face lit up with relief, and something that looked suspiciously like joy. When? Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Rosie's Diner on Main Street. Robert blinked. Rosie's Diner? Problem with that, Mr. Sterling? Evie raised an eyebrow, challenge sparkling in her green eyes. Not at all. Robert grinned, and Evie felt her heart skip a beat. When he smiled like that, genuinely and without arrogance, he was devastatingly handsome. I love a good diner. I'll see you tomorrow night, Miss Rosewood. As he walked toward the door, he turned back one more time. And Evie, thank you for giving me a second chance. After he left, Penny emerged from her hiding spot like a jack-in-the-box, practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," she whispered frantically. "He called you Evie, he asked you out, he apologized. This is better than any romance novel I've ever read." Evie sank into a chair, her legs suddenly shaky. "What have I done?" "You, my dear friend, have just agreed to a date with the most eligible bachelor in the state." Penny grinned. "And I'm going to help you get ready." As Evie watched Robert's BMW pull away through the library window, she couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet, predictable life was about to become anything but. Evie changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple sundress, the color of summer sky, her golden hair flowing in loose waves over her shoulders. She arrived at Rosie's diner 5 minutes early, partly from nerves and partly because she wanted to see Robert's reaction to the decidedly unglamorous venue. Rosie's was the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and the red vinyl booths had seen better decades. The local farmers gathered here every morning at 5 a.m., and the dinner crowd consisted mostly of families who'd been coming here for generations. It was about as far from a 5-star restaurant as you could get. Perfect. Through the window, Evie spotted the familiar black BMW pulling into the parking lot. Her heart did a little dance as she watched Robert get out, looking around with curiosity rather than disdain. He'd dressed down for the occasion, dark jeans and a navy button-down that brought out his eyes, but somehow still managed to look like he belonged on a magazine cover. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and every conversation in the diner stopped. Rosie's didn't get many customers who looked like they'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. Evie. Robert's face lit up when he spotted her, that genuine smile she was beginning to realize she liked far too much. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She felt heat rise in her cheeks as he slid into the booth across from her. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." "I'm a man of my word." He picked up the plastic-covered menu, scanning it with amusement. "Though I have to admit, this is a first for me." "What, eating food that costs less than $50? Robert laughed, a rich sound that made something flutter in Evie's chest. "Touché. Though I was thinking more along the lines of a first date where I'm genuinely nervous." "Nervous?" Evie raised an eyebrow. "The great Robert Sterling gets nervous? Around beautiful librarians who aren't impressed by my bank account? Absolutely." He leaned back, studying her with those steel-gray eyes. "You're not what I expected, Evie Rosewood." "What did you expect?" "Someone easier to figure out." Before Evie could respond, Rosie herself appeared at their table, all gray curls and maternal warmth, with a coffee pot in one hand and a knowing smile. "Well, well. If it isn't little Evie with a handsome stranger." Rosie's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Coffee for both of you?" "Please." Evie nodded, grateful for the interruption to collect her thoughts. "Make mine black," Robert added, earning an approving nod from Rosie. "A man who doesn't need sugar to make things palatable. I like him already, honey." Rosie winked at Evie before bustling away. "She's known me since I was 5, Evie explained, watching Robert's amused expression. "Fair warning, by tomorrow morning, half the town will know we had dinner together." "Good thing I'm trying to improve my reputation then." Robert accepted his coffee with a grateful smile. "So tell me, what does a small-town librarian do for fun?" "Read, obviously. Tend my garden." "Volunteer at the animal shelter." Evie wrapped her hands around her warm mug. "Apparently throw water at obnoxious businessmen." "I deserved that." Robert's expression grew serious. "I want you to know I've never acted like that before. There's something about this project that's made me desperate, I guess." "Tell me about it." "The real reason, not the business presentation version." Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if it held answers. "My father built Sterling and Associates from nothing, started with one small apartment building and grew it into an empire. When he died 3 years ago, I inherited everything, the company, the reputation, the expectations." Evie could hear the weight in his voice. "That's a lot of pressure. This development project, It's my chance to prove I'm more than just the son who inherited everything, that I can build something meaningful on my own. He looked up, meeting her eyes. But somewhere along the way I lost sight of what meaningful actually means. And what does it mean? I'm beginning to think it has something to do with preserving beautiful things rather than tearing them down. His gaze was intense, making Evie feel like he was seeing straight into her soul. Like century-old houses, and the people who love them. Rosie reappeared with their food, meatloaf and mashed potatoes for Robert, chicken pot pie for Evie. Simple, hearty comfort food that filled the diner with the kind of aroma that made you think of home. "This smells incredible," Robert said, taking his first bite. His eyes widened in surprise. "This is amazing." "Rosie's been making that meatloaf the same way for 30 years, Evie smiled. "Sometimes the simple things are the best things." "Is that your philosophy on life?" "Part of it." Evie cut into her pot pie, steam rising from the flaky crust. "I believe in taking care of what matters. Family, friends, traditions, places that hold memories. Money can't buy any of that. But it can preserve it," Robert said thoughtfully. "What if I told you I've been thinking about that? About finding a way to save your house and still complete my project?" Evie's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I'd say you're either very creative or very desperate." "Both, probably." Robert grinned. "What if we could move your house?" "Move it?" Evie nearly choked on her bite of pot pie. "You want to move a 150-year-old Victorian house?" "It's been done before. Historic preservation societies do it all the time when development threatens important buildings." Robert leaned forward eagerly. "I could find you the perfect lot, maybe somewhere with more land for your gardens. The house would be preserved exactly as it is, and I could complete my project." Evie stared at him, searching his face for any sign of manipulation. But all she saw was genuine excitement and hope. "That would cost you a fortune." "I told you everyone has a price. Maybe mine is proving to you that I'm not the heartless businessman you thought I was." "Robert." Evie set down her fork, her green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "That's the most thoughtful thing anyone has ever offered to do for me. Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe." She smiled softly. "I need to think about it, and I'd want to see the new location first." "Of course. We could look at properties this weekend if you'd like." They finished dinner talking about everything and nothing, her job at the library, his travels around the world, childhood memories, favorite books. Evie found herself laughing more than she had in months, charmed by Robert's wit and surprised by his depth. As they stepped outside into the warm evening air, Robert caught her hand gently. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Evie. I know I didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves a second chance." She looked up at him, her heart racing at the touch of his fingers against hers. "The question is what you do with it." "I intend to make the most of it." Robert stepped closer, his free hand reaching up to tuck a strand of golden hair behind her ear. "May I see you again?" "I'd like that," Evie whispered, acutely aware of how close they were standing, how the evening light caught the silver flecks in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. The air between them crackled with possibility, and she found herself leaning slightly forward, drawn by an attraction she hadn't expected to feel. But Robert stepped back with visible restraint, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles instead. "Good night, Evie. Sweet dreams." As she watched him drive away, Evie touched her lips unconsciously, wondering what it would have felt like if he had kissed her properly. The thought sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. Inside her apartment an hour later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the best evening I've had in years. Looking forward to house hunting with you. R." Evie smiled, saving the number in her contacts with a little heart emoji before she could think better of it. Maybe Penny was right. Maybe she really was living in the beginning of her own love story. And for the first time in her carefully ordered life, that possibility didn't terrify her. It excited her. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of golden sunshine that made everything look like a painting. Evie stood on her front porch, smoothing down her flowing white sundress and trying to calm the butterflies that had taken up permanent residence in her stomach. She'd barely slept, alternating between excitement about seeing Robert again and anxiety about potentially moving her beloved family home. The rumble of an unfamiliar engine made her look up from her thoughts. Instead of the sleek BMW she expected, a vintage red pickup truck pulled into her driveway. Robert climbed out wearing jeans, work boots, and a plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd stepped out of a country magazine. The transformation was so complete that Evie had to blink twice to make sure it was really him. "Good morning, beautiful." He walked up the path with that confident stride she was beginning to find irresistible. "Ready for some house hunting? Is that your truck?" Evie gestured toward the pickup, her green eyes sparkling with amusement. Robert actually looked sheepish. "I borrowed it from my foreman. Thought it might be more appropriate for looking at rural properties than the BMW." Very thoughtful. She couldn't help smiling at his obvious effort to fit into her world. "Though I have to say you clean up nice as a country boy." "Why, thank you, ma'am." He tipped an imaginary hat, making her laugh. "Shall we go find your house a new home?" The first property was a disaster. 20 minutes outside town, it was nothing but a muddy field with a broken-down barn and a view of a gravel pit. Robert took one look at Evie's horrified expression and quickly steered her back to the truck. "That was just a warm-up," he said diplomatically. "The realtor assured me the next one is much better." The second property was worse, a narrow lot squeezed between two busy highways with the constant roar of traffic drowning out their conversation. "I'm starting to think this was a terrible idea," Evie sighed as they drove toward the third location. "Hey." Robert reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "We'll find the right place. I promise." The touch of his fingers sent warmth shooting up her arm, and Evie had to concentrate on breathing normally. "How can you be so confident?" "Because I've learned that when something really matters, you don't give up." He glanced at her, his gray eyes serious. "And this matters to me, Evie. You matter to me." Before she could process that earth-tilting statement, they turned down a tree-lined dirt road that opened into the most beautiful meadow Evie had ever seen. Rolling green hills stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with wildflowers and framed by ancient oak trees. A small creek meandered through the property, sparkling in the sunlight like scattered diamonds. "Oh my," Evie breathed, stepping out of the truck. "Robert, this is perfect." He came to stand beside her, watching her face light up with wonder. "It's magical." She walked toward the creek, her white dress floating around her like something from a fairy tale. "How did you find this place?" "I may have called in a few favors." Robert followed her, hands in his pockets, trying not to stare at the way the sunlight turned her hair into spun gold. "The owner is an elderly gentleman who wants to see his land go to someone who will love it. When I told him about your house, about your family's history, he said he'd be honored to have it here." Evie turned to face him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You told him about my family?" "I told him about a woman who understands that some things are more important than money, that there are people in this world who still believe in preserving beautiful things." Robert stepped closer, his voice growing soft. "I told him I was hoping to become one of those people." "Robert," Evie's voice caught in her throat. "There's more." He pulled out his phone, showing her architectural sketches. "I've been working with a structural engineer all week. We can move your house here and restore it completely. New foundation, updated plumbing and electrical, but keeping every original detail. The wraparound porch, the gingerbread trim, even the old swing in the backyard." Evie stared at the sketches, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness and care that had gone into every detail. "This must be costing you a fortune." "Worth every penny." Robert tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Besides, I might have ulterior motives." "Such as?" "Well, I was hoping that maybe once your house is settled in its new home, you might let me take you on proper dates. The kind where I don't have to worry about the whole town gossiping about us." Evie laughed, leaning into his touch despite herself. "What makes you think I want to go on more dates with you?" "Call it optimism." Robert's thumb traced along her jawline, making her breath catch. Or maybe it's the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. How do I look at you? The question came out barely above a whisper. Like maybe you're starting to like me despite your better judgment. Before Evie could deny it, her phone rang, shattering the intimate moment. She fumbled for it, trying to ignore the disappointment in Robert's eyes as she stepped away to answer. Evie. Penny's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. Where are you? I've been trying to call all morning. I'm out looking at properties with Robert. Why? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect. I just got off the phone with my cousin who works at City Hall, and girl, you are not going to believe what I found out about your boyfriend's building project. He's not my boyfriend, Evie protested, acutely aware that Robert could probably hear every word. And what about his project? It's not just any development, Evie. He's building affordable housing for families. The whole complex is going to be subsidized units for teachers, firefighters, nurses, people who can't afford the crazy rent prices in town. Evie felt her world tilt again. What? That's not even the best part. My cousin says he's been working with the city for months to make sure there's green space, playgrounds, even a community garden. This isn't some money-grabbing scheme, honey. Your man is trying to save the world, one apartment at a time. Evie hung up the phone in a daze, turning to find Robert watching her with a mixture of hope and anxiety. You heard that? She asked. Hard not to. Penny has quite a set of lungs on her. Robert ran a hand through his hair nervously. I wanted to tell you myself, but I wasn't sure you'd believe me. After our first meeting, I figured you'd think it was just another manipulation. Affordable housing? Evie stepped closer to him. For teachers and nurses? People like you, Robert said quietly. People who make the world better every day but can barely afford to live in the communities they serve. I know it's not glamorous or profitable, but it's right. Something inside Evie's chest cracked open, flooding her with warmth. This man, this beautiful, complicated, surprising man, wasn't just trying to win her over. He was trying to become worthy of her. When did you decide to change the project? About 3 days ago. Right around the time a certain librarian made me realize that some things are more important than profit margins. Robert smiled ruefully. Turns out getting soaked with garden water was exactly what I needed to wake up. Evie looked around the meadow, imagining her grandmother's house settling into this peaceful landscape, then back at Robert, who was watching her with barely contained hope. Yes, she said simply. Yes to the meadow? Yes to moving the house? Evie stepped forward until she was close enough to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to breathe in his scent of cedar and sunshine. Yes to all of it. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. And yes to whatever this is between us. Robert's expression transformed into pure joy. Evie. I'm terrifying myself right now, she admitted, laughing nervously. I've never felt like this before. Neither have I. Robert pulled her closer, his hands settling at her waist. Is it too soon to tell you that you've completely changed my life? Probably. Evie smiled, her heart hammering against her ribs. But I don't care. This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, she didn't pull away. Their lips met softly at first, tentative and sweet. Then with growing passion, as 3 days of building attraction finally found its outlet. Evie felt herself melting against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Robert rested his forehead against hers. Definitely too soon to say I'm falling for you, he murmured. Way too soon. Evie agreed, then smiled brilliantly. Good thing I'm falling too. Standing in that perfect meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and possibilities, Evie realized that sometimes the best foundations weren't made of stone and mortar. Sometimes they were made of trust, hope, and the courage to say yes to something wonderful. 2 weeks later, Evie was practically floating through her days. The house move was scheduled to begin in just 3 days. Robert texted her good morning and good night every single day, and she'd caught herself humming love songs while shelving books, something that made Penny insufferably smug about her matchmaking instincts. She was arranging a display of local history books when the library door burst open with enough force to rattle the windows. A woman stormed in, tall, elegant, and furious, with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe chignon and wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than Evie's car. "Where is she?" the woman demanded, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of getting exactly what she wanted. Evie looked up from her books, confused. "I'm sorry, can I help you find someone?" The woman's ice-blue eyes locked onto her with laser precision. "You're Evangeline Rosewood." It wasn't a question. Evie straightened, suddenly feeling very underdressed in her simple yellow cardigan and floral skirt. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Victoria Sterling, Robert's ex-fiancée." The woman smiled, but it was the kind of smile sharks gave to seals. "We need to talk." Evie's world tilted sideways. Ex-fiancé. The words hit her like a physical blow, even though Robert had never mentioned being engaged to anyone. What? Oh, he didn't tell you?" Victoria's laugh was like crystal breaking. How typical. Robert always was selective with the truth when it served his purposes. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Evie managed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Robert and I are just what? Dating? Do you really think you're the first pretty little small-town girl he's charmed?" Victoria stepped closer, her perfume, something expensive and predatory, filling the space between them. "Let me save you some heartbreak, sweetie. This is what Robert does. He finds whatever he needs to get what he wants, and right now, he needs your house." That's not true. But even as Evie said it, doubt crept into her voice like poison. "Isn't it?" Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. "Here we are at the Sterling Foundation Gala last month. Here's us at his penthouse 3 weeks ago. And here." She showed Evie a photo of herself and Robert in what was clearly an intimate embrace. "This was taken 2 days before he first came to see you." Evie stared at the photo, her vision blurring. 2 days before he'd shown up at her house with his arrogant smile and insulting offers, he'd been kissing this woman. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I? Tell me, dear, has he mentioned that our families have been planning our wedding for over a year? That Sterling and Associates is merging with my father's company through our marriage?" Victoria's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Or that this little housing project of his, the one that's made you think he's some sort of philanthropist, is actually a front to get city approval for the luxury condos he really wants to build?" "No." Evie shook her head, backing away. "He wouldn't do that. The affordable housing, Phase 1, darling. Once he gets approval and your house out of the way, Phase 2 kicks in. Luxury high-rises, million-dollar penthouses, and a nice fat profit for the Sterling family coffers." Victoria's smile widened at Evie's stricken expression. "Did you really think a man like Robert Sterling would throw away his fortune for some nobody librarian?" The words hit Evie like physical blows. She thought of Robert's gentle touches, his sweet text messages, the way he'd kissed her in the meadow. Had it all been an act? "Why are you telling me this?" Evie's voice was barely a whisper. "Because Robert is mine. He always has been, and he always will be." Victoria's mask of false friendliness dropped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "This little infatuation of his is amusing, but it ends now. Sign over your house, take whatever money he offered you, and disappear. If I don't, what? Let's just say that small-town librarians who interfere in billion-dollar business deals sometimes find themselves unemployed and unemployable." Victoria's smile turned vicious. "I'd hate for word to get out about your drinking problem." "My what?" Evie gasped. "I don't have a drinking problem." "You will by the time I'm done." Victoria snapped her purse shut with a final click. 24 hours, Miss Rosewood. Make the smart choice." After Victoria left, Evie sank into the nearest chair, her legs unable to support her anymore. Her hands were shaking as she stared at her phone, Robert's last text still glowing on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. You make everything better." R. Was it all lies? Had she been just another obstacle to overcome? Another problem to solve with charm and manipulation? The library door chimed again, and Evie looked up to see Robert himself walking in, his face lighting up the moment he spotted her. "There's my beautiful librarian," he said, striding over with that confident smile she'd fallen in love with. "Ready for lunch? I thought we could—" He stopped abruptly, taking in her expression. "Evie, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." Evie stood up slowly, putting distance between them. "Tell me about Victoria Sterling." The color drained from Robert's face so quickly that Evie felt her heart break all over again. His silence was answer enough. "Robert?" Her voice cracked on his name. "Tell me she's lying. Tell me you weren't engaged to her. Tell me this isn't all some elaborate scheme to get my house." "Evie, it's not what you think." "So you were engaged to her?" "Technically, yes, but—" "And you were with her 2 days before you came to my house?" Robert ran a hand through his hair, looking more distressed than she'd ever seen him. "That photo, it's complicated. She kissed me, I didn't— And the housing project? Is it really just phase 1 of something bigger?" Robert's hesitation lasted a heartbeat too long. "There may be additional phases planned, but that doesn't mean—" "Get out." And the words came out deadly quiet. "Evie, please, let me explain—" "Get out." This time she shouted it, loud enough that Mrs. Henderson looked up from her romance novel in alarm. "Get out of my library, get out of my life, and stay away from my house." "You don't understand." Robert took a step toward her, desperation clear in his gray eyes. "Yes, I was engaged to Victoria, but I broke it off. Yes, there were plans for luxury development, but I changed them. Everything changed when I met you." How convenient. Evie's laugh was bitter. The poor little librarian changed the big bad businessman's heart. What a lovely story. Too bad it's all lies. "It's not lies. Evie, what we have is real. What we have is over." She moved to the library door, holding it open. "The house isn't moving. The deal is off. And if you come near me again, I'm calling the police." Robert stared at her for a long moment, pain etched across his handsome features. "Evie, please, don't let her poison what we've built together. You poisoned it yourself the moment you decided I was just another business transaction." Evie's voice was steady now, carved from stone. "Goodbye, Robert." After he left, Evie locked the library door and sank to the floor behind the checkout desk, finally letting the tears come. Great gasping sobs that tore from her chest and echoed through the empty building. She'd been such a fool. Such a naive, romantic fool who'd actually believed that a man like Robert Sterling could fall for someone like her. That fairy tale love could happen to ordinary people in ordinary places. Her phone buzzed with text after text from Robert, but she turned it off without reading them. Whatever lies he was spinning now, she didn't want to hear them. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising the kind of rain that would wash everything clean. Evie pressed her face against the cool window and watched the first drops begin to fall, wondering how something that had felt so right could turn out to be so wrong. What she didn't know was that 3 blocks away, Robert was sitting in his truck in the parking lot of City Hall, staring at the official documents in his hands. Papers that would legally change his development from luxury condos to affordable housing, permanently and irrevocably. Papers he'd filed that morning before Victoria's devastating visit to the library. Papers that proved everything he'd told Evie about changing his life was true. But by the time he worked up the courage to show them to her, it might be too late. For 3 days, Evie existed in a haze of heartbreak and stubborn determination. She went through the motions, opening the library, helping patrons, organizing book displays. But inside, she felt like she was drowning. Every time her phone buzzed with another call or text from Robert, she felt the crack in her chest widen a little more. Penny had tried everything from chocolate ice cream to romantic comedies to get her to talk, but Evie remained resolutely silent about what had happened. All she'd said was that the house wasn't moving and she never wanted to see Robert Sterling again. It was Thursday afternoon when Martha from the diner burst into the library, her face flushed with excitement and indignation. "Evie, honey, you need to know what's happening at City Hall," Martha panted, having clearly run the entire 3 blocks. That Victoria Sterling woman is in there right now, trying to get some kind of emergency injunction to force you to sell your house. Evie's blood ran cold. She's what? She's got a whole team of lawyers with her, claiming Robert's development project is vital to the town's economic future and that you're standing in the way of progress. Martha's eyes were blazing with protective fury. They're saying if the project doesn't go forward, hundreds of jobs will be lost. That's not... How can she do that? Evie's hands were shaking as she set down the book she'd been holding. Money talks, sweetheart, especially when it's talking to politicians. Martha grabbed Evie's shoulders. But here's the thing. Half the town council is in there arguing against her. Seems like word got out about what this project really is, and people aren't happy about losing affordable housing for some rich woman's revenge scheme. Before Evie could process this information fully, the library door flew open again. This time it was Penny, her red hair wild and her eyes blazing with righteous anger. Evie! Penny's voice carried across the entire library. Please tell me you've seen the news. What news? Evie felt like she was drowning in information she couldn't understand. Penny thrust her tablet in front of Evie's face, showing a local news website with a headline that made her heart stop. Sterling heir exposes family corruption, donates fortune to affordable housing. What? Evie sank into the nearest chair, her legs refusing to support her. Read it, Penny demanded. Read it right now. With trembling fingers, Evie began to scroll through the article. In a shocking turn of events, Robert Sterling, heir to the Sterling and Associates real estate empire, has publicly severed all ties with his family's company and donated his entire inheritance to create a foundation for affordable housing development. The announcement came during what was supposed to be an engagement party between Sterling and Victoria Whitmore, daughter of Whitmore Industries CEO. This can't be real, Evie whispered. There's more. Penny scrolled down to a video clip. He held a press conference this morning. Evie found herself staring at Robert's face on the screen. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days, but his voice was strong and clear as he spoke to a crowd of reporters. My family has operated under the assumption that profit matters more than people, that success is measured only in dollar signs. I was raised to believe that anyone could be bought, that everything was for sale if you just offered enough money. Robert paused, running a hand through his hair in the gesture Evie had come to love. 3 weeks ago, I met someone who proved me wrong. Someone who showed me that there are things in this world that are truly priceless. Integrity, heritage, love. Evie's heart clenched as she watched him continue. I fell in love with a woman who values a 150-year-old house, not because of its monetary worth, but because of the memories it holds. Who chose to preserve her family's legacy, rather than accept millions of dollars. Who taught me that real wealth isn't what you have in your bank account. It's what you're willing to sacrifice for the people and principles you believe in. The camera zoomed in closer, and Evie could see the pain in his gray eyes. Victoria Whitmore and her family have spent the last week trying to force this remarkable woman to sell her ancestral home through legal manipulation and personal attacks. They've threatened her job, her reputation, and her peace of mind. All because I dared to choose love over a business arrangement. Robert's jaw tightened with anger. Well, I'm choosing again. I'm choosing to walk away from Sterling and Associates, from my trust fund, from everything my family built on the backs of people who couldn't fight back. Oh my God, Evie breathed, tears streaming down her face. The affordable housing project in Willowbrook will proceed as planned, funded entirely by my personal assets. Victoria Whitmore and her lawyers can contest this all they want, but they'll be fighting the Sterling Foundation, not Sterling and Associates. And every legal challenge they make will be public record, showing the world exactly what kind of people we're dealing with. Robert looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, Evie felt like he was speaking only to her. To the woman who changed my life, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I should have told you everything from the beginning, but I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did was real. My feelings for you are real. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that some things really are too precious to have a price tag. The video ended, leaving the library in stunned silence. He gave up everything, Martha whispered. His whole fortune, just to protect you and build those affordable homes. And to expose Victoria's manipulation, Penny added, scrolling through more articles. Look at this. The FBI is investigating her family's business practices. Something about bribery and illegal property seizures. Your boyfriend just brought down a whole criminal empire. He's not my boyfriend, Evie said automatically, but the words felt hollow. Honey, Martha said gently, a man doesn't give up $1 billion inheritance for someone who's just a business transaction. Evie stared at the blank tablet screen, her mind reeling. Everything Victoria had told her, every doubt she'd harbored, every reason she'd had for pushing Robert away. It was all crumbling around her like a house of cards. I have to go, she said suddenly, standing up so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. Where? Penny called after her as Evie headed for the door. To find him. Evie ran the 6 blocks to Robert's hotel, her yellow sundress flying behind her like sunshine. But the desk clerk informed her that Mr. Sterling had checked out that morning, destination unknown. She tried his office building, but it was locked and empty, with a for lease sign already in the window. Finally, as the sun was setting, she drove out to the meadow where they'd shared their first kiss. And there, sitting on the tailgate of that borrowed red pickup truck, was Robert. He looked up as she parked, hope and wariness warring in his expression. Evie. He stood up slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might scare her away. I wasn't sure you'd come. I saw the news. She walked toward him, her heart hammering. All of it. Then you know I'm officially broke. Robert gave her a rueful smile. Turns out giving away your entire fortune is surprisingly liberating, if completely terrifying. Robert, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have known that what we had was real. No. He shook his head firmly. You had every right to doubt me. I should have told you about Victoria, about my family, about all of it from the beginning. But I was so afraid of losing you that I kept trying to be the man I thought you deserved instead of just being honest about who I really was. Evie stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion and hope in his eyes. And who are you really? A former billionaire who's madly in love with a librarian. Robert's smile was soft and real. A man who spent the last 3 days realizing that all the money in the world means nothing if you don't have someone to share your life with. Just so we're clear, Evie said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. I fell in love with you before I knew about your money, and I'm still in love with you now that it's gone. Even though I can't afford to move your house anymore? Evie laughed through her tears. I've been thinking about that. Maybe it's time for the Rosewood house to stay put, and for me to learn that home isn't just about preserving the past. Maybe it's about building a future with the right person. Robert pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Are you sure? Because I have to warn you, dating a broke philanthropist comes with some serious lifestyle changes. Well, Evie smiled up at him. It's a good thing I know how to live on a librarian's salary. Though you might have to learn to appreciate Rosie's Diner a lot more often. I love Rosie's Diner, Robert said, leaning down to kiss her. Almost as much as I love you. As their lips met in the golden evening light, Evie realized that sometimes the best fairy tales weren't about princes rescuing princesses from towers. Sometimes they were about 2 people rescuing each other from the prisons they'd built around their own hearts. 6 months later, Evie woke up to the sound of hammers and the smell of fresh coffee drifting through her bedroom window. She smiled sleepily, pulling on her robe and padding barefoot to the kitchen of her beloved Victorian house, which was currently in the most beautiful state of organized chaos she'd ever seen. Morning, beautiful, Robert's voice greeted her from somewhere under the kitchen sink, where he was wrestling with what appeared to be a very stubborn pipe. His hair was dusty, his t-shirt was torn, and there was a streak of paint across his cheek. And he'd never looked more handsome to her. How long have you been up? Evie asked, stepping carefully around the tools scattered across her grandmother's hardwood floors. Since 5. Robert emerged from under the sink with a triumphant grin, holding up a rusty piece of pipe. But I finally got the water pressure fixed in the kitchen. No more pathetic trickle from the faucet. Evie laughed, accepting the coffee mug he offered her, served in one of her grandmother's delicate china cups, because Robert had quickly learned that she preferred beauty over practicality in the small things. You know we could have hired actual plumbers for this. Where's the fun in that? Robert wiped his hands on a dish towel, his gray eyes sparkling with genuine happiness. Besides, we're on a budget now, remember? Every dollar we save on the house means another dollar for the foundation. The Sterling Foundation for Affordable Housing had become Robert's full-time passion project, and watching him pour his heart into creating homes for families who needed them had only made Evie fall deeper in love with him. Gone was the arrogant businessman who'd thought money could solve everything. In his place was a man who got genuinely excited about installing energy-efficient windows and celebrating when they helped their first family move into their new home. Speaking of the foundation, Evie said, settling at the kitchen table with her coffee, Penny called last night. The Hendersons got approved for the unit on Maple Street. Robert's face lit up like Christmas morning. The family with the 3 kids and the grandmother? Really? Really. Tom starts his new job at the fire department next week, and little Amy will be able to walk to the elementary school. Evie reached out and took his hand, marveling as she always did at how perfectly her fingers fit between his. You're changing people's lives, you know that? We're changing people's lives, Robert corrected, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. I couldn't do any of this without you. It was true. Evie had become the unofficial heart of the Sterling Foundation, helping families navigate applications, organizing community events, and somehow managing to make everyone feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. She still worked part-time at the library. Mrs. Patterson had been surprisingly flexible about her schedule once she understood what Evie was doing, but most of her energy went into the foundation. The city council meeting is tonight, Robert said, settling into the chair across from her. Final approval for Phase 2. Phase 2 was 20 more affordable housing units, plus a community center with a library branch, playground, and meeting spaces. It had taken months of planning, fundraising, and political maneuvering, but they were finally on the verge of breaking ground. Are you nervous? Evie asked, studying his face. Terrified, Robert admitted with a laugh. A year ago I thought success meant making the most money possible. Now I'm measuring it by how many kids will have safe places to play and how many families won't have to choose between rent and groceries. It's a completely different kind of pressure. But a better kind? Infinitely better. Robert reached across the table and tucked a strand of golden hair behind her ear, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Especially when I get to share it with you. Before Evie could respond, the sound of multiple car doors slamming interrupted the peaceful morning. They looked at each other in confusion. They weren't expecting anyone this early. Evie! Robert! Penny's voice carried through the house, followed immediately by the sound of the front door being thrown open. You need to come outside right now. They rushed to the front porch, still in their pajamas and work clothes, to find what appeared to be half the town gathered in Evie's front yard. Martha from the diner was there with a platter of pastries. Old Mr. Jameson from the gas station was holding a toolbox, and Mrs. Henderson had brought her famous apple pie. What's all this? Evie asked, bewildered. This, announced Mayor Williams, stepping forward with an official-looking document, is the town of Willowbrook's way of saying thank you. He handed the document to Robert, whose eyes widened as he read it. They're naming the community center after us, Robert said faintly. The Rosewood Sterling Community Center. It was unanimous, the mayor beamed. The council voted last night. We also wanted to present you both with these. He handed them each a key. Honorary keys to the city, in recognition of your service to our community. Evie felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked out at all the faces, people whose children would benefit from the new programs, elderly residents who would have a safe place to gather, young families who would finally be able to afford to stay in their hometown. There's more, Penny announced, practically bouncing with excitement. Tell them, Mrs. Patterson. The elderly librarian stepped forward, her usual stern expression replaced by something that looked suspiciously like pride. The state library system has approved our application for a grant to expand the library branch in your community center. We'll be able to serve 3 times as many families and—" She paused dramatically. "We'd like to offer you the position of head librarian, Evie. Full-time with benefits and a salary that will let you focus entirely on the foundation work." Evie's hand flew to her mouth. "Mrs. Patterson, That's incredible. You've proven that libraries aren't just about books," the older woman said gruffly. "They're about bringing communities together, about helping people build better lives. You understand that in a way that can't be taught." As the crowd began to disperse, promising to see them at the city council meeting that evening, Robert pulled Evie into his arms on the front porch of the house that had started it all. "Can you believe this?" he asked, spinning her around until she laughed breathlessly. "A year ago I was a rich, miserable businessman with no real purpose. Now I'm a broke, blissfully happy community organizer who gets to wake up every morning knowing that what I'm doing matters. And I'm in love with both versions of you," Evie said, cupping his face in her hands. "Though I have to admit, I prefer the version that fixes my plumbing and gets paint in his hair." "Good thing," Robert grinned, "because that's the only version you're getting from now on." As he leaned down to kiss her, Evie thought about how dramatically their lives had changed. The house that she'd fought so hard to keep had become the foundation of something bigger. Not just a home for her and Robert, but a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over profit, community over individual gain. "I have something for you," Robert said suddenly, pulling back with an expression that made her heart race. "Robert, it's not my birthday for another month. It's not a birthday present." His hands were shaking slightly as he reached into his pocket. "It's more of a future present." Evie's breath caught in her throat as he dropped to one knee right there on the front porch, pulling out a ring that was nothing like what she would have expected from the old Robert Sterling. It wasn't a massive diamond or an ostentatious display of wealth. Instead, it was a vintage piece with a delicate band and a stone that caught the morning light like captured sunlight. "This was my great-grandmother's ring," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was the only member of my family who believed that love was more important than money, that building a life together was more valuable than building a fortune alone." He took her hand gently. "Evie Rosewood, you've taught me what really matters in life. You've shown me that the best things, love, family, home, purpose, can't be bought or sold. They can only be built day by day with someone who shares your dreams." Tears were streaming down Evie's face now, but she couldn't speak. "Will you marry me?" Robert asked. "Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that sometimes the best investments are the ones you make with your heart?" "Yes," Evie whispered, then louder, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." As Robert slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the sound of applause erupted from the street. Half the town was still there, having lingered to witness what they'd clearly suspected was coming. "About time," Penny shouted from the sidewalk. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in a closet together." Standing on her front porch, wrapped in the arms of the man who'd changed her entire world, Evie realized that fairy tales weren't about finding your prince in a castle. Sometimes they were about finding your partner in a fixer-upper, building something beautiful together from the foundation up. 1 year later, the morning of her wedding day dawned with the kind of golden sunshine that seemed to bless everything it touched. Evie stood at her bedroom window in her grandmother's house, watching as the backyard filled with white chairs and fairy lights strung between the old oak trees. She'd dreamed of getting married in this garden since she was a little girl, and now it was finally happening. "Stop peeking," Penny commanded from behind her, wrestling with what appeared to be miles of delicate lace. "The groom isn't supposed to see anything before the ceremony, and that includes the venue setup." "He's not even here yet," Evie laughed, turning away from the window. "He spent the night at the hotel downtown like a proper gentleman." "Which is why I love him," Penny declared, holding up Evie's wedding dress with reverent care. "He could have stayed in that fancy penthouse he used to own, but instead he chose to respect tradition and sleep on a lumpy hotel mattress. That's true love right there." The dress was perfect, Vintage lace that had belonged to her great-grandmother with tiny pearl buttons and flowing skirt that would dance beautifully in the garden breeze. Evie had found it in her grandmother's trunk just a month after getting engaged, along with a note in Cordelia's handwriting. For my darling Evie, when she finds a love worth waiting for. Your grandmother knew, Martha said from the doorway, carrying a breakfast tray laden with coffee and pastries from the diner. Cordelia always said you'd marry for love, not convenience, and that you'd do it right here in this garden. I just wish she could be here to see it, Evie said softly, touching the strand of pearls at her throat, another family heirloom that seemed to carry the blessings of generations. Oh, honey, Martha set down the tray and pulled Evie into a warm hug. She's here. Every flower in this garden, every board in this house, every tradition you're carrying forward, that's all her love, living on through you. 3 hours later, Evie stood at the back door of her house, her arm linked through Mayor Williams' elbow as he prepared to walk her down the makeshift aisle. He'd volunteered for the honor when Evie mentioned she didn't have a father to give her away, and the gesture had meant more to her than she could express. Ready, my dear? He asked gently. Evie looked out at the sea of faces. Nearly the entire town had come to celebrate, filling every chair and spilling out onto the lawn. The Henderson family was there, along with Tom's firefighter colleagues. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Even old Mr. Jameson had put on a tie for the occasion. But all of that faded into background as her eyes found Robert, standing beneath the arch of white roses that the local garden club had spent all morning perfecting. He was wearing a simple black suit, nothing like the expensive designer clothing he used to favor, but he looked more handsome than she'd ever seen him. His eyes were fixed on her with such love and joy that she felt her heart skip several beats. The string quartet, local high school students from the music program the foundation had helped fund, began to play Pachelbel's Canon, and Evie started down the aisle on legs that felt both shaky and steady at the same time. As she walked, she caught glimpses of the life she and Robert had built together. There was little Amy Henderson, scattering rose petals with fierce concentration. The Johnsons, who just moved into their new home on Maple Street, were beaming at her from the third row. Dr. Martinez, who ran the community health clinic at the new center, gave her an encouraging thumbs up, but it was Robert's expression that made tears spring to her eyes. He was looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered, the dream he'd never dared to hope for. When she finally reached him, Mayor Williams placed her hand in Robert's with ceremonial solemnity. Take good care of our girl, he whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear. I promise, Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. Reverend Thompson, who'd baptized Evie as a baby and confirmed her as a teenager, smiled warmly at both of them. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something truly special, he began. Not just the union of two people in love, but the celebration of a partnership that has already blessed our entire community. As the ceremony continued, Evie felt like she was floating. The words washed over her, promises of love, honor, and cherishing. But what she focused on was Robert's hands holding hers, steady and warm and real. When it came time for vows, Robert went first, pulling a slightly crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Evie, he began, his voice carrying across the garden. A year and a half ago, I thought I knew what I wanted from life. I thought success meant having more money than I could spend, more power than I could use, more things than I could count. He paused, his gray eyes finding hers. Then you threw water on me. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Evie grinned at the memory. That moment changed everything. You taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be built day by day, with someone who shares your dreams. You showed me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars but in love, in purpose, in the difference you make in other people's lives. Robert's voice grew stronger as he continued. Today, I promise to spend the rest of my life building dreams with you. I promise to fix your plumbing when it breaks, to hold you when you cry over sad books, to celebrate every family that finds a home through our foundation. I promise to love your stubborn independence, your fierce loyalty to the people you care about, and your beautiful heart that sees the best in everyone, even arrogant businessmen who don't deserve second chances. He squeezed her hands gently. Most of all, I promise that no matter what storms come our way, you'll never face them alone. We're a team now in all things forever. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Evie took a shaky breath and spoke her own vows without any written notes. Robert, you came into my life like a hurricane, disruptive, overwhelming, and completely impossible to ignore. More laughter from their friends. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted and what I stood for. Then you challenged me to dream bigger, to see beyond the safe little world I'd built for myself. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people whose lives had been touched by their work together, then back at the man who'd made it all possible. You gave up everything you thought mattered to build something that actually does matter. You chose love over profit, community over personal gain, and me over a life that would have been so much easier without a stubborn librarian in it. Evie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she kept going. Today I promise to dream with you, to build with you, to stand beside you as we make the world a little better, one family at a time. I promise to love your generous heart, your terrible jokes, and your complete inability to fix anything without creating at least 3 new problems in the process. Robert laughed, nodding in acknowledgement. I promise to be your partner in all things, in the foundation, in this community, and in whatever adventures life brings us. And I promise that no matter how successful we become at helping other people build their dreams, our own love will always be the foundation everything else is built on. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Robert's kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. As they broke apart, the entire garden erupted in cheers and applause, but all Evie could focus on was the way Robert was looking at her, like she was his whole world. "Hello, Mrs. Sterling," he whispered against her ear. "Hello, Mr. Rosewood Sterling," she corrected with a grin. They decided to hyphenate their names, honoring both their families' legacies. The reception flowed seamlessly from ceremony, with dinner served family-style on long tables under the fairy lights. Rosie had outdone herself with a feast that ranged from elegant appetizers to her famous comfort food, ensuring there was something for every taste and budget. The cake was a masterpiece created by the local bakery, 3 tiers decorated with sugar flowers that matched the ones growing in Evie's garden. As the sun set and the dancing began, Robert pulled Evie into his arms for their first dance as a married couple. The song was At Last by Etta James, chosen because, as Robert had said when they picked it, it perfectly captured how he felt about finally finding his home. "Any regrets?" Evie asked softly as they swayed together, surrounded by the warm glow of string lights and the love of their community. "Only one," Robert said, spinning her gently. "I regret that it took me 32 years to find you." "Well," Evie smiled up at her husband, "we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." 5 years later, the Rosewood Sterling Community Center buzzed with activity on a typical Tuesday morning. In the main hall, a group of seniors was taking a watercolor painting class, their laughter mixing with the sound of children playing in the adjacent childcare center. The library branch was packed with families participating in story time, while the computer lab hosted a job training workshop for recent immigrants. Evie walked through it all with a clipboard in one hand and her 2-year-old daughter balanced on her hip. Little Cordelia Rose Sterling had her father's gray eyes and her mother's golden hair, and an adventurous spirit that kept both parents on their toes. "Mama, book!" Cordelia pointed toward the library with the imperious demand of a toddler who knew exactly what she wanted. "After Mama finishes her meeting, sweetheart," Evie promised, kissing her daughter's cheek. "Daddy's waiting for us in his office." She found Robert exactly where she expected, surrounded by architectural plans, grant applications, and photos of families who'd moved into Sterling Foundation homes. But he looked up with immediate joy when his wife and daughter entered, abandoning his work completely. "There are my girls." He stood up, arms open wide, and Cordelia launched herself at him with a squeal of delight. How's Phase 4 coming along? Evie asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. The same desk they'd rescued from his old office before Sterling and Associates was dissolved. Better than expected. The city approved our proposal for the senior living complex, and we have funding for the first 20 units. Robert bounced Cordelia on his knee, making her giggle. Mrs. Patterson wants to be our first resident. Really? Evie's face lit up. She's ready to give up her house? Says she's too old to maintain it and she likes the idea of having other people around. Plus, she can walk to work at the library. Robert grinned. I think she also likes the idea of having front row seats to watch Cordelia grow up. Over the past 5 years, their foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams. They now operated in 3 counties, had helped over 200 families find affordable housing, and had been recognized by the state government for their innovative approach to community development. But more importantly, they'd built a life together that was rich in all the ways that actually mattered. Speaking of growing up, Evie said, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her still flat stomach. I have some news. Robert's eyes widened as he caught the gesture. Evie, are you? 8 weeks along, she confirmed with a radiant smile. I saw Dr. Martinez this morning. Robert set Cordelia carefully on the floor with her toys, then swept Evie into his arms, spinning her around the small office while she laughed breathlessly. Another baby, he whispered against her hair. Our family is growing. Sister, Cordelia announced from the floor, apparently understanding more of the conversation than they'd realized. Or brother, Evie corrected gently, but Cordelia shook her head with certainty. Sister, she repeated firmly, in the tone that suggested the matter was settled. That evening they sat on the front porch of their beloved Victorian house, now fully restored and filled with the sounds of family life. Cordelia was chasing fireflies in the front yard while Robert and Evie shared a porch swing that had been a wedding gift from the community. Do you ever miss it? Evie asked quietly, watching their daughter's delighted pursuit of the glowing insects. The money, the luxury, the easy life. Robert considered the question seriously, as he always did when she asked it. I miss the security sometimes. The knowledge that we could handle any emergency without stress. But the luxury? He shook his head. This is luxury. This house, this family, this community we've built together. Knowing that our work matters, that we're making a real difference in people's lives. Having you fall asleep in my arms every night and wake up beside me every morning. Watching our daughter discover the world with wonder and joy. He pulled Evie closer, his hand finding its familiar place on her still small bump. I was rich before, but I wasn't wealthy. Now I'm both. As if summoned by their conversation, several neighbors wandered over, Martha with fresh cookies, the Hendersons with updates on Tom's promotion to fire captain, Dr. Martinez with a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate their pregnancy news, which had apparently spread through the community with typical small-town speed. Soon their front porch was filled with the easy laughter of friends who'd become family, while Cordelia held court in the center of it all, charming everyone with her toddler wisdom and infectious giggles. You know what I love most about this life? Evie whispered to Robert as they watched their chosen family celebrate together. What's that? It all started with me throwing water on you. She grinned up at him. Who would have thought that losing my temper would lead to finding my soulmate? Best business proposal I ever received, Robert agreed, leaning down to kiss his wife, even if I didn't realize it at the time. As the evening wound down and they tucked a sleepy Cordelia into her crib, Robert and Evie stood together at their bedroom window, looking out over the garden where they'd been married, the community they'd helped build, and the life they'd created together. Happy? Robert asked, his arms circling her from behind. Completely, Evie sighed contentedly, leaning back against his chest. Though I have to warn you, if this baby is anything like their sister, we're in for quite an adventure. Bring it on, Robert chuckled. I learned a long time ago that the best things in life are worth a little chaos. And as they prepared for bed in the house that had started it all, the house that had taught them both what really mattered, Evie reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them here. From that first angry encounter in the garden to this moment of perfect contentment, every step had led them exactly where they belonged. Sometimes the greatest love stories began not with love at first sight, but with conflict, growth, and the courage to become better versions of themselves for each other. And sometimes, the best foundations for a lifetime of happiness were built not on money or status or perfect planning, but on trust, shared dreams, and the radical decision to choose love over everything else the world had to offer. In the end, Evie thought as she drifted off to sleep in Robert's arms, that was the most valuable lesson of all. True wealth couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. It was measured in moments like this, peaceful, perfect, and absolutely priceless. The end.